Would Eric be asked questions at the table?
Sometimes he would be asked questions. Most of the time he would try to answer a question or something and my dad would just tell him to shut up. And he was very rough with Eric.
Were there also talks that took place in the basement?
Yes.
And did you have a basement both in Muncie and in Pennington?
Yes.
And what is your earliest memory of talks in the basement?
Very early, like 6 years old.
Okay. Now, was this basement that was set up like some sort of a recreation room, or was it an extra bedroom? What, we're talking about the basement.
It was a
Muncie.
recreation room where there would be a couch and chairs.
And how would you and your dad sit?
And the ping pong table. He would sit in the higher chair and I would sit on the couch usually.
How close would you sit?
I would sit kind of hunched over and my knees would be in between his knees and he would be hunched over too. And our heads would be touching. And we would talk that way.
And what would he talk about?
Either we went over what I was going to do the next day if I had a match or practice, or there would be something that he was disturbed about, that he needed to. I would repeat phrases, and we would basically go over the philosophies that were to correct whatever he didn't like that happened. Like,
give me an example. We're talking about when he's 6 years old. Or if you have an example that's later, just tell us how old.
Well, when I was playing soccer on the team with Mr. Gross, with this kid Jerry was playing, and his picture was on the wall at one point. And I believe I was 7 or 8. I'm not sure. And at one point I had a conversation with Jerry and his dad, and they were Jerry's dad pretty much always came to the games too, and he would take Jerry aside after the coach finished talking to everybody, and he would sort of laugh and talk with Jerry, and sometimes I wander over in that direction, and my dad would usually call me back, say, I want to talk to you, and we'd talk. One time Jerry's father came over and he grabbed me and said he wanted to talk to me about something. He wanted Jerry and I to get together and practice outside the team and do something. So he was talking to me about it, and I talked to him about it, and then the game resumed. And in the basement, my dad brought it up. He said, you were over talking to Jerry and his dad. Well, what did I tell you about having friends? I said, he just wanted to talk to me about practicing after that. I think it's a good idea. He said, no. What I tell you about having friends. And then he'd say, let's go over it. And that's when we put our heads together. And that's when I would repeat to him.
What would you repeat?
Phrases from his books. And I would, that time I repeated a phrase, or I would just sit there and he would say, tell me what I told you about friends. And I would say, I have to constantly struggle because there are forces that tear me down, and sometimes they be disguised in the form of a smile or the hand of a friend.
Was that a quote from something?
It was a quote from the book. And he would repeat it, and I would repeat it, and he would repeat it, and then I would repeat it, and he would say, "Good."
How many times would you repeat it back and forth like that?
A couple times.
And in these talks, when your heads were together like that, if you said something that was a mistake, what would happen?
You know, he would bump my head.
Hard?
Not too hard, just enough. This was very trance-like. I usually had my eyes closed, and his forehead was on my head, and we would just repeat things in this voice. Sometimes his voice would get harder if he was trying to emphasize, or if he didn't like what I was saying, he would just bump my head like that, and I'd try to go back and do it again. And we would do that for a long time.
What's a long time?
Well, in Muncie, it would be like over an hour.